Okay, call order and roll call.
You're up.
Graham,
Present.
Mr. Hurd.
Here.
Okay. The notice of the meeting was posted on the district webpage, published as a legal ad in Superior Telegram, and posted throughout the district according to the school board policy. Discussion of the construction management firm for replacement of deteriorating synthetic surface and athletic complex at Northwestern High School.
Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. This has been a project that's been on the horizon. I've talked about it with previous boards. I've tried to put it in any of our communication from the business office via our district newsletters. So what my goal is here today is Mr. Smith to kind of talk about kind of the status of the existing field that we have down there. I'd like to bring in via Google Meets Ross Rettler in a little bit here to talk about the Rettler Corporation and what they do. They were the original construction firm that built that field back in 2008, 2009. And kind of Stevens Point. Yep. So local. That's pretty local. We'll call them North Enough. How's that sound?
They did the original one.
So they know the facility well, the footprint well, and we'll let them talk about the services that they can offer as part of this project in a little bit. So, Mr. Smith, if you want to kind of turn it over here a little bit, talk about what you see as AD on the field itself, and we'll kind of go through everything.
I believe you received what I showed the board in May of 2022. We had the Brock USA and Midwest Sport Turf System out into our stadium, and at no cost to us, Brock went ahead and did some testing on our surface. The first one is called a Hick test. That's basically the compaction, how compact and hard the field is. So that is the red sheet. The standard is 1,000 or less is what the industry standard is. And of the 45 locations tested, only one of those locations on our field met that standard. Every other location was below standard. And that was a season ago. So we played another season on it.
We played two.
22 and 23. We played 2 seasons on it. The other one is the depth of the infill, the rubber tires in millimeters, and that range should be between 45 and 55. And as you could see, especially down the middle of the field, it's well below that. It's well below that in all places. We've talked to a number of vendors about adding infill, and due to the fact that the fibers are coming out quite rapidly, putting more infill in is counterproductive. There's no fibers to hold it in place, and it's just the field will become black and darker, and it'll move around, and it's just nothing to hold it. I believe we shared some pictures again that were taken. These are back in the 2021 season. We took some of these pictures of the infill coming through. The lines out there are supposed to be 4 inches. They're down to 2 or less in places. The white lines. One of them has the seam. You can see where the seams are coming apart now. A couple of the players' pants. So we practice, 60 guys out there, 65 guys out there, and every time a guy hits the ground, they're coming up with a pant full of the fibers. I mean, we're not even, they're just coming up sticking onto their clothes. Our tackling wheels, the pads we use are the footballs are just covered with fibers. We used to groom the field. We have an implement that grooms the field, which picks up the fibers, which allows, we don't do that anymore because you pull out 5, 6 bucket full of fiber, 5-gallon buckets full of fiber come off the field every time we groom it. So again, the issue is the compaction and then the loss of fibers. That eliminates we can't infill it again. We did it 6 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
6 or 7 years ago, we did add, which was about halfway through the life expectancy of the thing. We did, the company came in and put infill in it. But again, our field is 15 years old, and the life expectancy of those things are, and Ross will know better than I what the life expectancy is. I've been told anywhere from 10 to 12 years, and we're going on 15 or 16. So, yeah, I think we played on 08 the first time.
13, we played on 16 years.
Yeah. So, I think the need is obviously there. One of my duties is to make sure we have safe playing surfaces for our players, and I can honestly say that that's a safe playing surface for our football players and if I had kids and baseball, softball. And I know people think it's a football only field, but baseball's out there, softball's out there, track runs on the field itself because it's easier on their legs. Fayad's out there every day they can be. They were out there 2 weeks ago in December on the field. So it's gotten a lot of use.
It's a multi-use facility used by our youth programs, all of our sports teams, and
then the second issue would be then the track itself is I believe in need of, it's like a driveway. It needs to be resealed. It needs to be resurfaced and repainted. The lines are very faded. It's getting hard. It's that polyurethane starting to harden in the sun and stuff. So it's getting harder. So it's harder on the kids' legs when that stuff gets firmer. And some of it wears off because of use and weather. So, I mean, it needs some TLC in that track. And again, I think with the TLC, with the resurfacing and repainting, that thing will last us another decade plus. Versus the track versus tearing it all up.
Yep.
That's really expensive. So, I mean, it's pretty much, any questions on this? Pretty all self-explanatory, I think. These numbers are a couple years old.
I think it's important to note that, if you drive in the parking lot and take a peek at that field, it looks pretty green and beautiful from a distance. But the reality is that we're seeing a lot of deterioration of it. It's served its beyond its typical life expectancy. We've been told by a number of companies that it's the oldest turf field in our state right now currently. And what Brian alluded to is we want a surface that'll serve our students and not get into a situation that if there were some issues with that existing turf, then we are no longer able to play on it because this work isn't necessarily done in October, November, September. It needs to be planned for, and we can't just run down to the store and try to figure out how to fix potential issues mid-season for those purposes. So, Ross, I'm going to bring you on if you
Can I
want.
ask you a question first?
Yes, sure.
Before we get into that, clearly you just walk out there and you can see it's like I describe it like worn carpet. It's bad shape. But I think it's important to maybe articulate or what is the as far as the safety part of it, what would be the kind of the high risk injuries that could result as this field deteriorates? You know what I'm saying?
Concussions.
Concussions.
Is that what it is?
That's
Oh, yeah.
concussions is the big one. I would say you can have more.
You can have lower extremity. You can have lower extremity injuries, shin splints. When the kids are slipping on it now, I mean you've seen it this year more. Every year, it gets kid plants his foot, cuts, feet go off from underneath it, which could lead to shoulder separations. You put your arm down, broken wrists. There's been some lower extremity injuries. As the seams start to come up, now you're catching a toe on a seam when you're running. That could lead to some issues. But the concussion is a big one. Even with the good helmet, we buy the best helmets we can buy for the safety of the players. And it's just that compaction, that hard surface is tough.
If you want a good example, go to YouTube and watch the 1989 game where Colorado was at Missouri. And Missouri's turf was it was so bad and slippery. I mean, every play that Colorado run, the feet were coming out from under them. That's where we're at. I mean, the field is at its life expectancy, and somebody could get hurt.
When I was told by a number of schools that had turf, is that once it starts to go, meaning the fibers and things, it goes fast. And I noticed that and I took these pictures in 22. It's going fast.
Mm-hmm.
It's going fast.
Yeah.
The fibers come out. The seams are getting worse. We've had to glue down parts of the field because the adhesive's getting old.
I think what's interesting in this whole discussion is that it's not, should we have a turf field or not? It's, should we maintain what we have? That's,
And that is the grass field versus turf field. There's that debate out there, and if the board directs me to look into it, I will. The biggest problem that I see as part of that is that if we were ever to go to grass, it's not a facility you can practice on. You can't practice on a game grass field. It's just the reality, and we do not have a practice facility currently at our high school here. So there's a potential additional cost of trying to figure out what practice facilities may or may not be.
or
And
field.
you won't be able to play as many youth games on that field
That's part
because
of it.
that will tear up. It won't be. You'll just be tore up because it'll be used so much. So
Well, and else it's always, I mean, even if it's dry,
Yep, there's-
it's ready to go all the time.
There's weather that's related to that. There's upkeep in the summertime. Our custodial staff would have to be, in charge of that. There's lining, there's fertilizing, irrigating. All those other pieces come into the fray here, and that to me is the biggest hurdle of looking at a different surface. They, district invested in that field years ago. None of us were here at that time, I don't believe, but it's a facility that we have, and
Hey,
Cody.
Yeah.
Another big thing to mention too is you look at the potential if you were to go to a natural turf field, the drainage infrastructure and the base under that field is specifically designed for synthetic turf.
Yeah.
There are dollars associated with having to essentially change the
Yeah.
drainage profile of stone and all that too. So
to make sure that, so it's not just simple as we rip up the existing field and bring in some topsoil and plant some grass.
I brought that up because we're not making that decision now.
No,
We're not-
that's not our recommendation.
Right.
no, we're recommending.
Maintaining what we have.
So this is a potentially a big project, and I'm trying to make sure myself, Mr. Smith, Mr. Moore, we don't live in this world. So Ross Rettler from Rettler Corporation is with us via Google Meets. I'll kind of turn it over to him to kind of just talk through what they do as a corporation. As I said before, they were the original construction firm that helped build that field back in 2008, 2009. So go ahead, Ross.
all right, guys. Well, good afternoon, Team Maple. On behalf of Rettler Corporation, I want to thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to chat with you here this afternoon. I'm Ross Rettler, a landscape architect with our firm. Rettler Corporation has been in business now for over 35 years and really started down this path of working on athletic facilities from day one. We did a lot of work in the park and rec industry, and then started doing a lot of referendum work. And as part of all of these projects, there was always a track and field, baseball fields, athletic facilities, things of that nature. So really, we found a niche in the athletic facility design realm. We have landscape architects, civil engineers, land surveyors, and construction managers as part of our firm. So really what we found is we were designing the facilities, but then over time, we found that they weren't really being built to the specs that we expected them to be built to. So we brought in the construction management service as part of our group. And the idea was we had boots on the ground. We had folks there to make sure the projects that we were designing were getting built properly. So from planning through construction, we do not act as a general contractor, but we do act as a firm that will provide construction observation services or a CM as advisor. So that's really where we found our niche in the athletic facility design and construction industry. Historically, as you guys all know, we had worked along with you as part of the 2008 project with the track and field construction, along with some of the other improvements as part of the site. And based on what I've seen out there and the work that was done, the track and field were built well. But as Cody and Brian had alluded to, the field that you guys have, it has met its useful life expectancy, as we would consider it. 10 to 12 years is 12 years is always a number that I tell folks. Field that's well maintained, that's the life expectancy of that turf. So what you're hearing today is consistent with what we would understand in terms of the life cycle of the turf. So what we really do, as we've been very fortunate, this industry's been very good to us. We're at the point now in Wisconsin where we're starting to replace our first generation of fields. You guys are paralleling right now with Rice Lake, field that is a very similar age. They're also replacing their field coming up this year. And really what we do as part of that process is with replacement of these existing fields, Rattler Corporation puts together the bid package for you. We put together a design. We work with your staff and key stakeholders to come up with a design for your field. We put together a bid package that goes out to the select or the big turf vendors in our industry. We put together that package along with the specifications, the contract document itself, identifying key time frames for when the construction work would start, when the construction work would need to be complete. And we put those items out to bid for competitive bidding through Rattler Corporation with the district. What would then happen is our bids would come back. We'd evaluate all the bids, look at the different products, and I should segue and say, we talk about the different products with you and identify a product or a series of products that you would like to get numbers back on. I think the industry has really directed us towards, as we look at multi-use fields, specific types of products that we would recommend to you. But we could also look at, the monofilament, slit film, blend, monofilament, slit film, blend. We can talk about all the pros and cons of each of those products, and we can help you guys define, what product would be best for you. And then the other big thing is we talk about safety. I think it's important to talk about is the concept of the shock pad now. So a lot of the fields that we were doing, our first generation, our first go around fields, a lot of those did not have shock pads, but now I would say about 80% of the fields that we do have that shock pad incorporated as part of it. And including that as part of your project is one thing that you guys would want to consider. So big picture, we put that all out to bid, get our numbers back, we quantify and clarify all the bids, and then we put together a bid recommendation for your group based on the bids that we get. And then at that point, we put together the contract document. We provide that. The contract would be direct with the school district, the turf vendor, and the school district directly. And then upon start of work, Rattler Corporation would be available on site at key times to evaluate the installation process and make sure it's all going according to plan. And then really, as it comes down to finishing up this replacement process, we'd be there to walk through the O&M and maintenance training along with your equipment. It sounds like you guys still have equipment that's working pretty well. We'd be there with the turf vendor and your team, your maintenance team, to evaluate, the maintenance process as part of that new turf. So in a roundabout way, that's typically the process that we're seeing. We are, like I said, coming up on replacement projects, which is pretty exciting. Obviously, there's dollars associated with that, but it's cool to see these fields being replaced. And I think the biggest thing is, as engineers in our firm, from day one, we were really kind of the first ones in when it came to the synthetic turf specifications and developing these synthetic fields in Wisconsin. And what we've come to find is that our fields in the base infrastructure, the storm sewer infrastructure, the curb nailers, all those important parts of the field are actually in really good condition. And really that allows us and the turf vendor to come in and really replace those fields without having to do much of anything, which is a good thing. So that's kind of a short summary or a long-winded summary, however you look at it, as to what we do. But one other thing I wanted to mention right away was, Brian, I heard you talk a little bit about the existing track. So with that being a polyurethane track, you guys would be able to we'd have to evaluate it and look at it a little bit, but you can do that structural spray application to that track, which is actually a wear course. They'd spray on it and restripe it. So that's something, if you had any questions on, I'd be happy to walk you through that process too. So
Good. Any questions for Ross at all from the committee?
I have a question. So at some point, there's different types. Now we have the fibers and the infill. That's a type of turf. Are there other significantly different types of turf?
So that's a great question. I believe that the turf that you guys have, that may be a monofilament. I'd have to look back at our records, but the turf itself has come a long, long way since 2008. The majority of our clients within a multi-use type scenario opt to go with what's called a blend. It is a blend of monofilament and slit film fibers. So it provides both great playability, but also durability as part of adding that slit film we can get into all the details of that. But it's really that blend product that we're seeing the majority of our clients go with. And then now there's actually within the last couple of years, there's actually a blend with what is called a thatch layer. And that thatch layer is a nylon or nylon base layer in the turf that actually helps with infill migration, spray, and then that thatch layer actually adds a more durability to the turf system itself. So that's what the majority of the clients are going with these days. From an infill standpoint, I think as you look at Europe and as you look at the East Coast and the West Coast of the U.S. right now, there's a lot of discussions about alternative infills. We have done alternative infills, but as we look at Wisconsin specifically, we are still using, the majority of the projects still use the crumb rubber material with sand. So
Yeah, I think Ross brings up just the point of why our recommendation is to use them is that these are products and companies will come in and sell them. And of course, they're all going to say that they have the latest and greatest and best thing. I need somebody that does this work to help evaluate, are we getting what's best for the school district of Maple and our students and staff?
We had 5 or 6 vendors come on site. When Cody and I met them, and again, they're talking a language that we don't understand. And I go to workshops and I do stuff in my world about turf management. I took a course on turf one time at a conference, but it's hard. I mean, plus we got other things to do with our job. And there's a few other things we got in the cooker. So being able to have somebody talk the language and compare apples and apples, because it's hard to compare. I mean, we have like 6, I think, and it's hard to compare products. It's hard to compare apples and apples. So having an expert is helpful.
We want it done right and make sure it's a facility that will continue to serve us for years to come, and not be in a situation where 5 years down the road where, we thought we were good, but all of a sudden something pops up. That's one of the big things we want to avoid. I don't think that's the best. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. Let's do a project that lasts. And that's, like I said, Brian and I are not turf experts. We don't live this world day in and day out. Ross and his group does. So that's what the thought process is.
I have a few questions. Sure.
What is the lifespan on these newer fields?
Could you pick? I might have to interpret there. You're a little bit further away, so can you get that? Okay.
Yep. So I still always say, guys, we're right around that 12-year mark. I think the turf has gotten better. The backing, the glue that they're using, all that stuff has gotten better. However, I always say a well-maintained field is right around 12 years is kind of the number that as you look at long-term, as you get budgeting for replacement, that's the number that we typically say in terms of the useful life cycle of the turf. I think the other thing that's really helpful for you folks as you look at, we bid a lot of projects. We live and breathe this every day. We work with all the turf vendors, and the turf industry is an interesting one. It's pretty cutthroat in terms of how they approach projects. I think they all can offer products that are good products, but it's really, I think Cody alluded to it. It's nice to have as kind of your representative as part of the project. It's good for you to understand what the benefits are and the pros and cons of each different type of turf. So I think that is an important part of it. The other thing with bidding so many projects, we have a really good idea of where the industry is at in terms of pricing for these different types of products. So as you would move forward in the planning, we can specifically look at costs like the disposal, the removal and disposal process, and the cost for that. We can provide you guys estimates based on the types of turf we'd be using, the potential for a shock cut, restoration of any of the wood on the nailer. We can provide all those numbers to you so you understand prior to going out to bid exactly what we're looking at. So,
Vince, you might have a question.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So first of all, thank you, Ross, for coming to this meeting today and educating us. I appreciate it very much. It sounds like you got a great bunch of experience that would be helpful. You mentioned something, and I don't want to get into the weeds too deep here, but you piqued my curiosity when you said shock pads. And
yes.
Can you educate us what that is?
Okay, so great question. So Brian talked a little bit about it earlier. So safety is the number one thing with these fields, right? We want to make sure our student athletes and our competitors are on a safe playing surface. And the old fields without the shock pad, he was talking HIC testing, and I speak HIC, but I also speak GMAX, which is kind of a more old school way of looking at it. But the fields without a shock pad, and what that is it's a foam. Think of it like a puzzle. It's a foam puzzle that goes together. It's 14 millimeters in thickness. That's the one I would typically recommend. It's a puzzle that goes down prior to placement of the turf. And what that does is it provides an extra layer of cushion underneath that turf. The fields that we were doing years back, when you do a GMAX test, let's say day one after the field's constructed, the ASTM requirement that needs to meet is 100. It's 200 in terms of GMAX. The number 200 is what you need to understand. In our spec, we required a number of 160 for GMAX testing. Now, with adding that shock pad, what we're seeing is that day one, as you test those fields, we're around the 70s, 80s, maybe 90s. So really what it does is it takes that, the biggest thing we talk about every day is concussions, right? Lower extremity issues are a big one too, but concussions was the big thing that people were running into. And that synthetic system with a shock pad is actually, as you look at it from a GMAX standpoint, is actually quite a bit softer than even a natural turf field. So really by adding that pad, it's reducing the concussion or the weight. When they drop the weight, it's reducing the head impact on the turf surface itself. So
Ours sits on basically pea gravel right now. You put it on there, you can open up a box, you could see the pea gravel, and then it's the matting, and then it's the turf. I mean, it sits on grass, so it sits on now.
so
It's a carpet pad. You described it as a foam. Can you be more specific?
yeah, so it's a lot of it's recycled material. There's different types of shock pads out there, but if I could compare it to anything, it'd be styrofoam. It looks a little bit like styrofoam. And it's like I said, it comes in like puzzle pieces, 14 millimeters in thickness, and it is a pervious system. So as you look at all the water that would go through the field, that foam is actually pervious. So the best way I can put it to you, polypropylene, it looks like styrofoam, but it's a very durable styrofoam. In that shock pad, the one that we typically specify, and I think I heard you talk a little bit about, Brian, the Brock product.
Yeah.
The reason I like Brock, there's others out there, but I like Brock because they're very calculated in how they develop their products. There's a lot of data behind how they do it and why they do it. But their product, it looks like styrofoam, essentially.
So just from what you described, and I think I heard you say polypropylene, is that kind of the weak link then in your new field? Is that, or I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking that, boy, that could probably break down and wear out before the rest of it. I mean, maybe not.
Great question. So the product, the Brock product that we specify, they guarantee or say that product will withstand 2 life cycles of turf.
Okay.
So the biggest thing that degrades that product is actually UV light. So upon replacement, if there's a shock pad in place, you can use it again for the second life cycle of turf, but you need to make sure that as they roll the turf off to replace it, that it's not sitting out in the sun for extended periods of time.
Makes sense.
But they do say that it will extend 2 life cycles of the turf.
Thank you, Ross. Other questions that we might have? Like I said, at the heart of this, this is a project that we're looking to try to figure out, okay, what are the options? What are the dollar amounts? What are the questions that we might have that we can't answer? And then, have somebody in our corner that says, okay, yeah, this is a product that will work for you, or this is a sales pitch, and this is something that isn't maybe in the best interest for the district. So the goal of this, and the reality is what brought us here is that the district has, well before I ever got here, taken good care of that field. And the reality is that it's carpet. The fibers have worn out to the point where it's gotten to a point where we have to address it. That's all there is to it. Otherwise, we'll be looking at different opportunities elsewhere to try to figure out how we do our athletic opportunities for our students. And I do mean it is multi-use. Football field being one of it, but Carl alluded to it. I think it's important to reiterate our 5 classes go out there, our youth programs play there, our spring sports, when we have our snowy winters, that's usually the first place they get to because that does melt faster than the fields that they play on. Our track does use it too. I think another important point, it's a big part of our summer school program. We have on average 70 students roughly a day that in the summer school area that are using that facility as well. So it's used. It's not just a one trick facility. It's used quite a bit.
It's not just 5 weeks out of the year.
Yep.
So
Any other questions for Ross before he sneaks off?
I trust you have like a cost
Yep.
breakdown for the
That's what we're working through. Yeah.
services and
Yep. That's part of what we're working through, and that'll get shared with you. Speaking of, and Brian and I do want to share this information as a fairly recent development. Brian and I approached the board, was it over a year and a half ago? Somewhere in that range, about potentially partnering with corporate sponsorship. A lot of districts across the state are trying to do some private business partnering to offset some of the costs. Happy to announce just recently that Essentia Health, who we've had a partnership with for over 20 years for our athletic training positions, our weight room here, our fitness center here. They are looking to come on board and make a significant contribution to help us offset some of these costs, which we're excited about. We're still going to continue to try to look for additional partners as we try to step through this process, but more to come on that one. And thank you to the Essentia folks we've been working with for many, many years. So with that, Peg, do we need
We need to, I'm sure, I'm going to ask for consensus to bring this to the full board for recommendation to contract with Rattler.
We're in a consensus vote for.
well, I guess my feeling is that do we need to bring that cost structure along with that proposal?
that'd be something that we're working through right now, yeah. But this is the time frame of this is we do have to start laying down some breadcrumbs here.
Are you talking the cost structure to hire Rattler or for the whole project?
I just think from a wellness perspective that would be appropriate. So there's no surprises by anybody. You know? It seems like this is a very good fit and something that we would want to pursue. But just from the sake of what we're signing up for, I think that'd be appropriate.
So yeah, again, Brian's point is, like I said, we would walking through this, the bid packages would come to the board, we'd make a decision. Yeah, so, okay, which direction are we gonna go? Which vendor are we gonna go with? But I know Ross here would like to get rolling on the stuff just to do the reality is that if we're looking to do this project in the near future, aka this summer, we're gonna have to make some decisions and get on construction schedules probably sometime in February is what we're.
Is it too late to do it at the next board meeting?
That I don't know, Ross. Would you be able to reiterate? We're still looking at February as kind of a time frame if we're looking to get projects done this summer. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, I think the important thing is that these turf vendors are currently bidding work. It's not as big of a challenge with the materials itself in getting the turf. It's really the big challenge is finding the crews because these guys are all over the United States. They're sending crews from all over the place. It's getting out in a good time frame to get them locked in from a construction standpoint, getting that crew allocated to your project. So I don't like bidding in March. I would prefer to bid the project and let the project in February if at all possible. So as you look at the process for developing the bid package, we have a very good understanding of your facility. We designed it, managed construction of it, so we know a lot about what we need to do to deliver that bid package, but I think it's important to understand we got to get out in front of those guys sooner than later. Just from getting a crew, getting a contractor selected or a vendor selected, and getting a crew allocated to your project. The other thing I think that you do have a little bit in your favor here is that I had mentioned Rice Lake. you guys are close. They're not exactly in the same location, but as you look at the northern part of the state, they're going to be going out to bid here. Understanding that you're going to have a project in that general location, I think that could be beneficial as you look at the companies bidding it, mobilization of those crews and when they would be moving crews from one project to the other. I think that could be a benefit to the district. So, but yeah, February is the window. I wouldn't want to bid in March. So.
But we don't have to push this really fast in January, but as long we got January to still work a little bit, get everything, our ducks in a row, and then bring it to
January.
February.
The one thing that does take a little bit of time is looking at, and for us to put together the big package, that's one thing, because we have to do our due diligence and get all the documents put together, but it's really working through the process of what you want your new field to look like too.
Yep.
So that, as we look at the review process through, the key stakeholders and then, what you want that field to look like, that does take some time to gain consensus. So.
I think haste I think we should act tonight to authorize hiring Rettler. We don't want to delay this thing. We don't really have the facts now anyway. And hire Rettler. So that's my in the consensus. That's I say go for it.
Well, let me just ask this question. And this is to Ross. I don't know if it's a ROM type, a rough order of magnitude type pricing structure. Is it a percentage of the project? How is your fee structure based?
I talked to Cody about that too, and I based our fee. It's a lump sum fee. It's based on the amount of time that we typically have into these projects. And over time, we've gotten more efficient. So our replacement costs for design and bidding and all that have come down, but it's a lump sum number that we've provided you guys here tonight.
Are you looking for like a ballpark?
I just
Of what?
I don't like surprises.
I mean, are you looking for a ballpark figure of what Rattler's going to cost us to use?
If that'd be appropriate, I don't like surprises, and if I don't like just giving an open checkbook.
Yep.
Especially when we're trying to be, prudent with our way we're spending everything. So
Ross, what would a ballpark figure of your company doing this project for us be?
It's the proposal that I provided you guys is for $24,500. As you look at, I put together a preliminary budget of where I think you're going to be. If you put a percentage on that, that's roughly 3.5% of the value of what I would anticipate the project to be.
That answer that?
yeah, to me that's a gut feel that okay, we're not talking crazy numbers here.
No,
Thank you for that. And it's important to me.
No problem.
Appreciate that,
Asking
Ross.
tough questions.
Yep, that's a good question to ask. So,
Okay, so we have a consensus to move forward.
And just let's restate what the proposal is to the board.
so the proposal would be to bring on Rettler as the construction management and bid, really to put out the project to bid to the various turf vendors. And that's, as Ross alluded to, they're going to work with us to make sure that we, what the options are. Most likely, and Brian alluded to this, we had 5 or 6 vendors that actually toured the facility with us. So I would anticipate, and Ross, you can tell me differently, that we'll probably have multiple vendors interested in this project.
Yeah, I would say 4 or 5.
Yep. And then from there, working with us to pick the best option for our district. And then what's most important to me from my chair is to make sure that that project is done right, done to the spec that we need. So it's a facility that has much been like the facility we have right now. It's been pretty much maintenance free for the last 16 years, which is what I'm looking forward to. And we're not going to get 5 years down the road and find some kind of big issue that we didn't know existed because we didn't have somebody looking at it that does this work. So,
Cody, would it be appropriate to include with our proposal to the board even kind of a rough plan of, okay, by February, we want to have this accomplished, so that he can do his work, and then by this date, this is kind of some rough milestones.
That's part of what we would start working with Ross on to say, okay, what's kind of what I would call a construction timeline. What's, here's the, the bid timelines that we have roughly to get the information out to our vendors. Here's when we expect to have it back. Here's when we can work together internally to say, okay, here's the bids that we place to the board and say, all right, let's make this determination together. So really, like I said, rough time frame based off conversations with Ross, we're looking at roughly February-ish to make some of those decisions. So
I would think, Cody, if we could be out, just looking at a quick time frame, if we could be out to bid in the first week of February, say the 5th through the 9th, I typically want to let these projects for at least 2 weeks, give them 2 weeks to put their numbers together. So we would have numbers back, say, the week of February 19th to the 23rd, and then have a recommendation ready for your board March 4th. I'm assuming you meet the first Monday of the month. Typically, that's kind of how it works, but it would really be that like early February we need to get out. So it is getting
tight. Yeah.
But
My goal would be to have some kind of decision made in the month of February, just to make sure that we're covered.
I would agree.
Now, if that might require a special board meeting, it may, because I know our board meeting in February is the 12th, I believe. So still fairly early on in the month.
March is 18th.
March is a little bit later, and I don't think we don't want, my gut tells me we don't want to be that late.
No, we don't want that.
no,
Ross, can I ask a question? Just for the board, how long does it usually take a company to put a field in? 3 weeks?
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
I
So,
always give them a month,
Okay.
just because I believe that helps a little bit with giving them some flexibility in a bidding window when they're bidding the project. To give them a month on that field to get it installed, I think it's going to give you some better pricing. But what I've typically seen is it could range, depending on how everything goes, it could range from 2.5 weeks, or it could go to 3.5 weeks. But I think that 3 week number is what I always tell people, and most of the time they get it done quicker.
and the reason I asked that, I wanted that question presented is the earlier we can make a decision on this, the earlier we get on a list to get it done. Because, like I said, even if it's June 27th, all right, then it gets it done on July 27th, and football starts the next week. So
Right.
you want it ready to roll. So
We don't have a place to practice.
yeah. So the sooner the better.
August 6th or
And-
7th is our first practice.
Yeah. And so that's why I'm glad that we could meet today to kind of get the ball going before the January meeting, and then we've got time in January to get our ducks in a row to get everything presented in February. So if that makes sense.
I think the other important thing that we'll have to do, guys, is we're going to have to talk a little bit with Brian and your programming folks to understand when they could mobilize and start doing construction. The one thing I would tell you is that a lot of districts don't have flexibility in terms of being able to provide alternate locations for practice. The big thing is everybody wants their fields done before August, right? So even if we let this project in February, we get bids back in February, one thing that could be beneficial, and I don't know how it works with you guys, if we can give them a wider window or if we allow them the opportunity to start earlier, a lot of districts don't want them on the fields right away, early spring, because they got program events happening and stuff like that. So that's another thing we'll have to work through with your team, is to figure out when we can get in there and when we can start work.
Yep.
So
Flexibility is my middle name, Ross.
It's
All right.
available in February.
We
don't have any snow right now.
Our last home practice was midnight.
That'll be all the details that we
So
work
that's the
through.
window right there, right?
So,
We have to relocate our fighting class and stuff for a couple of weeks, but
We can do that.
it depends on who with the track. They still need to practice, so. Yeah, I mean, our first game is August 23rd at home, and we got to practice somewhere. And I really don't want to bus over to Superior.
Nope. So
That costs money too.
this actually
I have
gives.
to go get ready for basketball.
Okay.
So.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Brian. Any other questions for Ross?
See you, Ross.
I don't have any other questions for Ross. I do appreciate what he brings to the table, though, very much so. Maybe a couple questions for you after
Sure.
we're done here.
So appreciate everything, Ross. I don't know if we want to make a consensus. Is that the right use?
Consensus?
Need a consensus? We'll get it on the January agenda.
consensus to move forward with them and bring it
Nodding your
forward.
head, yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, consensus with that, but I'm not ready to adjourn.
All right, Ross, I appreciate it.
So yeah, and I think Cody, if you do have consensus at the end of the day, I think the next step really would be diving into, working with you guys to figure out what
Yep.
this field's gonna look like, working through all the different products and
We'll,
getting on that as soon as you're ready. So you let
I'll
me
probably
know.
give you a call tomorrow.
All right, guys. Well, hey, thank you guys all so much for your time this evening. Have a wonderful Christmas, and we appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ross.
Cheers.
I guess the other thought that is important to me is kind of the financial plan behind this.
Yep.
Right? And as a board member, I'm sure we're all wondering, jeepers, how are we going to pay for this? What are your thoughts in what should we expect to propose to the board, the rest of the board in January or February, or just speak to me about that part of it?
So costs are, and to be completely honest with you, that's why I wanted to take this step tonight, is because I'm gonna need help without having any kind of, parameters.
Yeah.
I mean, we've heard anywhere from $550,000 to $750,000. It's just, there's so much variability in it now that we've got to start paring it down to say, okay, what is this project gonna look like for us? And then from there, we're still continuing to actively look for additional corporate partnership. We've been meeting with a few different other, the reality is that there's not a ton of local businesses that can partner to the level that you might have to partner on this project. So we are trying to work through that together. I don't want to say anything at this moment. I'm not trying to be secretive, but those conversations are happening, but nothing has solidified yet.
Yeah.
And hopefully just give us the benefit of the doubt on that one in terms of what we are trying to work through, because I am trying to, Brian, Carl, are trying to figure out a way to offset the cost of this as much as feasibly possible through really naming rights, some advertisements, things of that nature that you see on all the fields today, either on the press boxes or in the entryway gates, on the field itself with logos and things of that nature. So those are all things that we're working through. So short-term answer is I need to figure out what it's going to look like in terms of getting a dollar associated with it before I can come back and say, okay, here's how we can wrap this together. I can say confidently this will be a project that will have to finance on some levels. There's not going to be the ability to have a cash outlay.
Even if it's at the low end,
Yeah,
if it comes out 500 and let's say Ascension wants to kick in a bunch, we're still gonna have to finance it.
Yeah, that's the short answer. But I have to put those pieces of the puzzle in place, and part of that first step is okay, what are we doing here, and what is this looking like, and then from there, and I want to make sure that this is not secretive to our board, to our community. I've been out with our staff and like I said, our public through our newsletter. This is not a project that I'm trying to hide. The reality is that nobody was here when this project was done, but it's a project that we have to look to address. Otherwise that field will no longer serve the purpose it's serving. I mean, it'll be a point where we can no longer put anybody on it safely. And that doesn't mean just football, that means all of our programs. That's track, baseball, softball, our gym, our youth programs, our summer weight programs, all that stuff. You can't pick and choose who goes on and on. So that's what I really want to avoid. I think the community has made an investment in this facility, and it'd be a shame to have to abandon it and figure out where else we do this stuff. I don't think that's best for our students, our athletes, and anybody else in between.
But I think the working together, we've got some options, we've got some ideas. We just need a little more time to put the ducks in a row, and when we do, I think you'll be pleased.
Yeah, I'm so far I'm really pleased, that we have folks that are willing to come to the table and contribute. That's a big deal. I want to reiterate that it's not important to me that we got down to dollars and cents as far as so detailed. there's guardrail room for flexibility there, but to have some rough order of magnitude type stuff, I think is important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, you know, just so there's level setting expectations and, we anticipate we'll have to finance it. You know, and this is what that means. And that's my ask.
That's exactly what, like I said, this is the first step in helping myself, Carl, and Brian start to bring something more concrete forward.
Yeah, but I applaud you for making this type of contact, and I think that's going to be very helpful.
Yeah.
In the long run, it'll probably, every penny we spend on this guy, it'll probably save us.
Oh, it'll be, it's money well spent. And the other thing when Cody and I talk about this is being open and transparent through the whole process. I mean, from this first step here all the way through, and is what we want to do. So people see what we're doing. It's an investment we have to make. You know, sometimes we have to. It's not like we're wasting money. We're investing back into our facilities because we've got 16 years out of this field. Now we have to invest back into it, and we have to, you know, for the next generation of kids coming through. So you have to do that every so many years and keep upgrading facilities. Otherwise, they fall apart on it.
So I believe we have consensus. We can look to adjourn.
We need a motion.
We need a motion
To
to adjourn.
adjourn, I'll make that motion.
I'll second it. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes.